Answer key to the pretest. For the first section, I just checked by factoring. And I don't see that one over here. Check by factoring. And I don't see that one over here. Check by factoring. Oh, that one matches right there. And that one matches right there. So this one's B and this one's D. So since these aren't factored, I can do one of two things. I can change these to factored form, or I can just multiply these out and see if they match the standard. So x minus 1 times x minus 1 is x squared minus 2x minus 24, x squared minus 2x minus 24, so this one matches here, and then by process of elimination, that's C. On the bottom section, for this one, when I'm factoring, I look for a GCF first. There's no GCF here. 2 doesn't come out of this one. So instead, I have to just go ahead and factor. So I can either say it's 2x in the front of that one and x in the front of that one, and then guess and check. -6 can be 6 and 1, or 3 and 2. Plus or minus, minus or plus, because that's negative and that's positive. Plus or minus, and minus and plus. And now because I have a lead coefficient, they could also be in either order. So I can just start guessing and checking. Put a 3 here, put a 2 here, multiply it out, see if it's here. Nope, didn't work. Maybe the 2 goes here and the 3 goes here. Maybe it's 6 and 1. Maybe it's 1 and 6. Or you can use slide and divide, which I've never used before, but now I'm absolutely in love with it. You take the lead coefficient and you multiply it to the back, x squared, 11x minus 12, and then you factor that like a regular positive 12 and -1. That multiplies to give me that, that adds to give me that. Okay, so now that I have my two factors, I have to divide by what I slid. So it's x plus, divide that by 2, 6, and x minus 1/2. But you can't have a fraction. You can't have a fraction there. So what you do is you move that. So x plus 6 and 2x minus 1. So if I played around with these, this would have been a plus 6 back here, and this would have been a minus 1 here. So it would have been those top two. And then you can circle that answer. I don't know where that's at. Next page. Again, just factoring x minus 5, x minus 3, negative times negative is positive, -5, -3, and -8, whichever that one that is. This next one, you're given in factored form, and you want to get it into vertex form. But in order to move it from factored form to vertex form, you have to put it in standard form first. So you just multiply it out, x squared, -4x, -12. In standard form, you can always find your y-intercept. In factored form, you can always find your x-intercepts. And this was on one of the homeworks where you set them equal to 0 and you solve. You set the other binomial equal to 0 and you solve. So those are your two x-intercepts. And then you have your y-intercept, and the last thing you need is your vertex. So you take your standard form. When you're changing to vertex form, remember the first thing you do always is move that constant out of the way. Take that -12 and move it out of the way. Now since there's no lead coefficient, you can go ahead and take half and square it. Half is -2, squared is 4. But you can't just go adding a 4, you also have to subtract the 4. So remember we did x minus the 2 squared minus the 16. So your vertex is 2, -16. Your x-intercepts you found over here. I should have done the work down here. So your two x-intercepts are 6 and 2, -2. You can also write them as 6, 0, and -2, 0. Your y-intercept, you can also write, instead of just saying -12, as 0, -12 is your y-intercept. So those are your parts. Then you go to your Desmos and you check to make sure that those are correct answers. You do it after you've done the problem. This next one has a lead coefficient. It's in standard form. And in standard form, you can find your y-intercept. Okay, factored form, I look for a GCF first. There's no GCF. So I'm going to do the slide and divide. You want to guess and check? Here, I'll guess and check first. 2x and x. And this can either be 2 and 2, or 4 and 1, or 1 and 4. I'm going to try... That's my guess, that's my negative, that's my positive. I'm going to do slide and divide just to double check it. So I take the 2, and I move that 2 over to here, multiply it over there, so that's x squared minus 7x minus 8. Factor that. Divide by what I slid over, so divide by 2. So I have x minus 4, and I have, instead of writing this as 1/2, I'm going to slide it back, 2x plus 1. Yep, that's what I had when I factored. So my 2 x-intercepts, I can set that equal to 0 and solve. I can set that equal to 0 and solve. So when I do x minus 4 equals 0 and I solve, I add 4 to both sides. I get 4. When I do 2x plus 1 equals 0 and I solve, negative 1/2. You could also see that kind of when you did the slide and divide, it was 1/2, negative 1/2. And again, you can write those like that or as ordered pairs. And the y-intercept we already said was negative 4 or 0, negative 4. So you have your, oh, they didn't even ask for the vertex here at all. Okay, well that's fine. But I still go in Desmos and I check that out to make sure those are my 2 x-intercepts and that's my y-intercept. People said they had trouble with number 8, and that was it. Here's number 9. Again, I'm gonna take what I know from this point right here. This is factored form. And in factored form, you can find your x-intercepts. So my x-intercept, if I were to solve that, was 2. And my x-intercept, if I were to solve that, was 4. It's kind of the opposite sign, right? When you set it equal to 0 and you solve. Or you can write them like that. Okay, changing it to vertex form. You can't just go straight to vertex form unless it's in standard form. So I'd have to multiply this all out and put it in standard form. And remember, in standard form, oops, I didn't mean parentheses, you can always find the y-intercept right here. So in standard form, you found your y-intercept. Now I'm going to put this in vertex form. Remember, vertex form, the first thing you always do is move that constant out of the way. And since there's no lead coefficient, you're going to go right ahead to completing the square. You take half, which is negative 3. You square it, which is 9, but you can't go adding 9, so you have to subtract 9. So x minus 3, quantity squared, is this right here. X minus 3 times x minus 3 will give you that, and then minus 1. And your vertex then is 3, negative 1. Your axis of symmetry, remember, comes from here. And it's x equals 3. And I usually stick my vertex right in the middle of my table, and then I'll do a couple points on one side and a couple points on the other side. So 3, 4, 5, 3, 2, 1. I'll probably usually get a 0 in there just to make sure. My x-intercepts are 2, 0, and 4, 0. And my y-intercept was 8. So if I had a 6 down here, that would be 8 also. And then I'm going to graph. So I'm going to go to my vertex, which is 3, negative 1, 3, negative 1. And since my lead coefficient is a 1, I can follow that pattern of out 1, up 1. Out 1, up 1. Out 2, up 4. Remember, you square it. Out 2, because it's quadratic. Out 2, up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. Out 2, up 4. 1, 2, 3, And then out 3, up, square it, 9. Out 3, up 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And that's the same thing over here. And then I just double check my graph with my information. My vertex was at 3, -1. 4 and 2 were my 2 y-intercepts. X-intercepts. 8 was my y-intercept. And so everything works out. And then you connect it in a U-ish shaped pattern. If anything, try to make sure that you get your vertex, your x-intercepts, and your y-intercept on your graph. And to balance it out, make the symmetrical point over here. Do you need to graph your axis of symmetry? I don't know what the directions say, but let's go ahead and do it. There's my axis of symmetry, and everything should work out. On the bottom, the transformations, well, it's facing up, so there's no transformation. There's no reflection. It is a lead coefficient of 1, so there's no wide or narrow. It's the regular. So those two do not need, since A is positive, it's facing up. Since A is 1, those two are regular as compared to the parent function. But what did happen was that you had a translation to the right and a translation down. So if you guys remember, that was a horizontal translation or shift to the right 3, and then a vertical translation or shift down 1. So that's how you describe that. All right, now this was the hardest problem for everybody. Remember, when you're done with a problem or when you're having trouble with a problem, check it in Desmos. You guys will be able to use your Desmos when you're doing the chapter test, but you have to show all the work first. But then maybe go to Desmos, see what the answer should be, and adjust your work based on that. So this one's hard because we have a lead coefficient of -2. It doesn't say anywhere here to factor, but I'm going to do that anyway just so I have those in that piece of information. When I factor, the first thing you always look for is a GCF. And there is a GCF here, it's 2. But I'm actually going to take out the negative also so it's easier to factor. So when I take out the -2 or the GCF, I have x squared minus 4x minus 5. Right, so you take up the negative and then I just remultiply it just to double check. All right, and then I'm going to take this and factor that. So -2, x minus 5, x plus 1. So my x-intercepts, if I set this equal to 0, that doesn't make sense. If I set this equal to 0, I get 5. And if I set this equal to 0 and solve, I get -1. So you can write that like that, or 5, 0, -1, 0. All right, so that they didn't ask me to do that anywhere, but I just getting the factoring out of the way so that I have my 2 x-intercepts. All right, now they asked me to change it to vertex form. First step in vertex form is to always move that constant out of the way. So -2x squared plus 8x plus 10. Move that 10 out there. Now I cannot go ahead and complete the square here because there's a lead coefficient. So I have to take the lead coefficient off of these two. So -2 x squared minus 4x. Now I can complete the square. So when I take half, it's -2. I square it is 4. But that's -8. If you guys remember from way back when, that's -8. But I can't just add on a -8. So I have to undo that by adding 8. So I have a -2 out front. X minus 2 in the parentheses squared. And plus 18 out there. There's my vertex form, y equals, always put a y equals, so there's my vertex form. So my vertex is 2, 18. My axis of symmetry is x equals 2. My x-intercepts are these two. And my y-intercept, remember that comes from standard form. So I look at my standard form, and it's the constant right there is 10. And you can also write it as 0, 10. Now I'm going to go to my Desmos. I'm going to type that into my Desmos and just double check, which I actually did over here. There's my Desmos. I made sure that my y-intercepts were correct, or my x-intercepts right here. You can just click on them. ooh, it's -1, 0. Oh, yep, that works. And then I go look for my vertex. I click on it. Oh, yep, that works. So everything works. So I did everything right. And now I'm just going to make the table and the graph. So in the middle of the table, you should put your vertex. And then I just do a couple points that way and a couple points that way. Now, since the lead coefficient is 2, or -2, it's going to go a little faster. So maybe I'll make this a little bit. 3, 4, 5, 6. So maybe I'll do a couple more like that. 2, 1, 0, -1, -2. Maybe something like that. Just make a couple more points in my table. Let's see. My intercepts are 5, 0, and -1, 0. My y-intercept is 0, 10. So that means this one down here will be 10. And then I don't know what these are now, so I'll just double check those over here. So I go to 2, 18. Oh, be careful, this is going by 2s. So instead of if I went out 1, and now since it's a negative, I'm gonna have to go down. So instead of out 1, down 1, this is actually out 1, down 2, which is what I wanted because my lead coefficient is 2, so it doubles. Now instead of out 2, down 4, I'm gonna go out 2, down 8. But remember, this goes by 2s. So out 2, down 2, 4, 6, 8. Out 2, down 8. And then instead of out 3, down 9, I'm gonna go out 3, down 18. But remember, these are each 2. So 2, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18. And same thing over here. And I go like this. And then I just double, wow. And then I just double check. My intercepts were 5 and -1. And that's what I had up here. My y-intercept is 10. That's what I had right there. My vertex I already plotted was there, and everything matches. So I could fill in the table if I wanted to, but you really only need those main points. You need the vertex, the x-intercepts, the y-intercept. But I'm going to fill in some extra points too. So this is 3, 16, and then that would be 1, 16. Okay, and then the transformations, that was because I have an a of -2. First of all, the negative means that it was flipped or reflected. So now it opens downward. Because it is a 2, it is wider. Nope, skinnier. Or more narrow, because it grows faster. My vertex means that I had a translation to the right 2 and up 18. So horizontal translation or shift, and a vertical shift to the right 2 and up 18. Hope that helped. And again, double check everything in Desmos after you're done with the work. Here is your completing the square to put it into vertex form.